The day is here. The day we've all been waiting for, and by all I mean not you, me, or anyone you've ever known. Revel Moon Part 2, the sequel even Zack Snyder probably didn't even ask for.
You have tuned in to watch Jonny Law. Don't be daft.
For those of you that haven't seen the video that I made about the first Revel Moon movie, I'll put a link to that in the description. And for those of you that were, here's a quick refresher on the first film before we jump into the second. Woman farmer, a bald man dead, woman goes to pub, woman shoot, man fly, go to space, woman has mysterious past. I think that's Buckbeak. Woman actually space marine, spider lady, big fight, everyone shoot, end of movie. Let it be known that the main reason why the first film was so disappointing, for me at least, was it was the fact that Zack Snyder could have given us something new to get behind. A great new sci-fi franchise to rally behind, whilst simultaneously sticking it to Disney and modern Star Wars, proving that they were wrong for turning his pitch down and that you can actually make a decent sci-fi movie in the 21st century. But we actually got neither of those things. Actually, we got the opposite of that thing. We got a pretty mid movie that no one particularly cared about, and it also made Disney look somewhat competent due to the fact that they turned it down. If you didn't know, Zack Snyder wrote an idea for a Star Wars movie, pitched it to Disney. Disney told him to take a hike, so he went to Netflix instead. Netflix said yes, and that's how we ended up with Revel Moon. When we needed Snyder most, he didn't deliver and made Disney look smart.
Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
So, you can only imagine my shock and horror when the reviews for Revel Moon Part 2 began surfacing, and apparently it's even worse than the first one. But there's only one way to find out, and I'm dragging you with me, whether you like it or not. And if I'm not mistaken, the first film kicked off with a space vagina.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother?
So however is Revel Moon Part 2 going to start, I wonder? A phallic wormhole, perhaps?
To stand against the dreadnought.
Okay, the ship is mildly phallic, but the truth is, I'm just not seeing the male representation when it comes to interdimensional space portals. Do better, Snyder. Do better. Well, even more disappointing than that is the fact that the big bad that supposedly had been thwarted in the last movie, it turns out, thwarted. And as it so happens, he's been resurrected thanks to some sort of astronomical bukkake ritual. And of course, this wouldn't be a Snyder movie without a bit of flair. Literally. Let's count together how many lens flares we have in this shot. Well, we've got one right in the middle. You can see that one. Another in the bottom left corner. Great big one, stretching the whole length of the screen just at the top there. And hold on, there's actually two in the middle. Just spotted another one there. There's four lens flares in one shot. And that's a shot in the middle of the day. Imagine how many lens flares there's going to be on screen during some of the nighttime shots. There's going to be so many lens flares on one screen. You might as well just rub a Jackson Pollock painting on your retinas. And how am I getting Gladiator, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars vibes all in the same shot?
And now, a word from today's sponsor.
Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace, so we're here to make it as easy as possible for you to set up your own brand new website. And if you're anything like me, you won't know the first thing about web design, and maybe the word Python to you means snake and not language. Well, welcome to the club, but fear not, because you are exactly who Squarespace was designed for. After using their service myself, I can tell you that creating a website using their designer is remarkably easy, and is somewhat akin to personalizing a social media page more than it is hardcore coding and graphic design. Even if you have the creative inclination of a wet house brick, they've got templates and guides that can help you to create a site that looks more Da Vinci than, well, Kandinsky, if you know what I mean. I'm actually very fond of the work of Kandinsky, but, you know, if you want to look professional, neat is always nice, and it's never been easier with Squarespace. So to get you started, head on over to squarespace.com/JonnyLaw and use code JonnyLaw at checkout to get yourself 10% off your first site or domain. And a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So, Cora and the gang. Cora, by the way, is the main character for those of you who've watched both movies and completely forgotten because they've got terribly boring names. Cora and the gang triumphantly return to the village that we saw at the very start of the first movie, and the residents who lived there not only knew they were coming, but have had the time to prepare them a feast.
Our villagers have prepared a bounty of food and drink to show their fealty and gratitude at your arrival.
If a bunch of farmers with very little, if any, technology can track not only your whereabouts, but predict your time of arrival to a degree so accurately that they can preemptively prepare a feast for you. The big bad guys with the big bad technological ships, you can't imagine they'd have too much of a hard time doing that either, would you? And they don't. Thanks to a soldier and what appears to be a World War II era radio with a jam jar stuck to the top of it that was left behind after the initial invasion of the small farming village in the first movie, the big bad are able to coordinate a second incursion into the village in order to repossess the grain that they have produced. Yes, the linchpin of the movie is still grain. Why are we still talking about grain? This is a space movie. I don't give a shit about grain. Can we please move on from that and get to the lasers? That would be just spiffing. We spent more than half an hour in the first movie talking about grain. I would rather watch a painfully awkward kissing scene than spend one more second talking about grain. On second thoughts, farming is one of the most important industries, and we should consider what this movie has to say about the current geopolitical equilibrium. Love grain, please, more grain talk. We then get a flashback, and the main character, who I am calling the main character because I've genuinely just forgotten her name. I'd said it at the start, and I've already forgotten it. Well, it turns out that she was coerced into, that's not in the script, was coerced into murdering one of the royal family members, and is then immediately sold out as the sole murderer of the entire royal family. Now, this is all very dramatic and backstabby. However, the serious tone is somewhat undermined by the fact that there is a string quartet with what appears to be bin liners on their heads, literally in the scene playing along to the action as it plays out, because, well, if I'm honest, I don't actually know. I think it's fair to say that the characters in the first movie were lacking just a little bit of depth. No one cared about them, no one had any investment in them, no one knew basically anything about them, and they're about as compelling as the average TED Talk.
But there's a potential in chaos, if for nothing else but an act of creation.
Hang on tight, are you ready for a good time?
Wait, what the hell happened to TED Talks? I thought it was just people talk. Never mind. The point I'm trying to make is that's genuinely the first one I clicked on. I couldn't have proven my point better. But literally no one was invested in the main character. In fact, most people, myself included, can't even remember the main character's name, which is a bit of a problem because the main character is, well, the main one. And so Snyder decided to try and amend this problem in the second movie by diving a little deeper into a backstory.
I forgive you.
Right. So a backstory is now that she murdered a defenseless child in front of her parents. Yeah, that should get a few more people on board.
But somehow, the last words of the child, her forgiveness, I felt the only way to honor her was to run and try to be, I don't know, more than a weapon.
What you are.
Okay, so now the two main characters are bonding over this revelation. He doesn't seem to mind the fact that she whacked a kid because she worked as a farmer for a bit.
I'm extremely confused.
And look, I know Snyder likes his slow motion. And apparently, he really likes grain because all of the characters can't stop talking about it. But did we really need slow motion wheat shots? Did we need that?
Wow, a gun! I wonder if it's loaded.
So the village has 5 days to gather as much grain as possible and prepare for the imminent arrival of the big bad. And according to the villagers, gathering that much grain in so little time is unheard of. But they have no choice. I can't help but wonder though, if they have the technology needed to make a cart not only hover, but to do so silently, yet they couldn't have devised a slightly more efficient way of harvesting the grain other than doing it by hand. Is that too logic breaking? Should I just stop asking questions? I probably should, right? Okay. And although these movies can't seem to movie very good, one thing I will say is that the character with the most depth is Atticus. I've complained on many occasions that villains just aren't villains anymore. They're always misunderstood in a vain attempt by the mainstream to invert all of our basic moral values. But not these guys. The bad guys in this movie, namely Atticus, are suitably malevolent. They are evil simply because they are evil. And I like that. If you just don't give us any more slow motion wheat shots, we could be onto a winner.
Dear God.
There's more.
No.
You know what? I almost respect the fact that Snyder is doubling down on this whole wheat thing. It's genuinely quite amusing. The first movie, they spent the first half an hour of that movie talking about grain, and now we're about half an hour into the second movie, and it's just been shots of people harvesting grain. I feel like he's trolling us, and that genuinely is quite hilarious. Snyder led with Star Wars, but somehow came out with a live-action adaptation of Farming Simulator 22. Then, one of the village girls begins handing out these customized hand towels to the protagonist, each one of them decorated in a way that represents their character. Some accurately.
I felt like General Titus was like the mountains themselves. Strong and unmoving.
And others not so much.
Young Melius, who shines as the sun upon our faces, warming us and bringing us comfort.
Literally, the only thing we've seen from this character so far is this. Yeah, but don't let me stop you. Please, tell me more about how she's warm like the sun or whatever. Question. Have you ever done like one of those group job interviews, or has your employer ever made you sit down and do one of those team building workshops with your co-workers where you have to go around in a circle and tell everyone a little bit about yourself? It's incredibly cringy and very tedious. And those are two things that apparently Mr. Snyder is very fond of, because he makes all of the protagonists do that very thing. But rather than tell each other a quirky little anecdote about themselves, in this they instead take it in turns to tell each other why they're emotionally damaged. Mr. Mountain watched his friends blow up, Crazy Lady lost a day job, East Asian Lady has the same backstory as a lot of actual East Asian people.
We were peaceful people, but we hadn't always been. Long ago, we were a people of war.
And the guy who looks like he could have been a wolf in one of the Twilight movies watched his mum jump off a building. And with all of these positive vibes in the air, all of the protagonists come together and become the bestest of friends.
Friends, I can only say thank you for coming to this village and giving us hope.
Dude, he literally just told you that his mum jumped off a building. Why does that give you hope? That's kind of weird.
Now, not to get too pretentious with you, but this movie is ever so slightly poo-poo caca. But let's not forget that this is a Snyder movie, and there are some really nice looking scenes here and there, particularly shots of ships and some of the action shots. He is undeniably a visually driven guy. Doesn't always land, but when it does, it kind of slaps. The same cannot be said, however, for the dialogue and the delivery. That is a little more...
Oh, damn.
I've got a lot of respect for action and stunt coordinators and actors. You know, it's often a very underappreciated job and really makes a difference when it comes to action scenes in movies. But the action scenes in this movie suffer from the same thing that a lot of Western movies do, and the fighting has this very performative look to it. It's kind of hard to explain what I mean. There's this subtle delay to each movement, and there's this slight pause between each maneuver, giving it this rehearsed look, because, well, I mean, of course it is, but it looks too deliberate, and it's missing the spontaneity of a real fight. And the ending to the movie is as bombastic as you might imagine. I am a big fan of action and battle scenes, but I've got to say that the end of this movie, oh boy, it kind of outstays its welcome and feels like it goes on for a very long time. And the fact that Atticus ended up losing the fight at the end of the movie because he got randomly stabbed in the back seems a bit cheap. That's a bit of a cop-out. The emotional climax of the movie didn't quite hit either. Cora and Gunmar make for what is one of the least convincing on-screen couples I think I've ever seen, not to mention this line.
I know what you are. And I love you.
I mean, yeah, sounds kind of romantic when you hear it out of context, but what he's actually saying is, he's saying, I know that you murdered a child in front of a family, but I'm cool with that. It's not quite as romantic when you put it like that, is it? Just like the first Rebel Moon movie, my disappointment with the second doesn't stem from the movie itself as much as it does what the movie could have been. If there was a little more subtle character development, and I say subtle because I'm not going to count that team building session in the middle of the movie. If there's a little more focus on subtle character development and a little less focus on slow motion, that might have made for a good start. And although I wholeheartedly agree with Razorfist's June rule, having said that though, anyone who walks into a Zack Snyder movie not expecting to be ass blasted with gratuitous amounts of slow motion is an idiot. Of course that's going to happen. Then Deus Ex Resistance shows up right at the end and cleans up all the mess, and they all live happily ever after. Well, maybe not happily.
All of you, honor the fallen.
Yeah, that's what they're literally in the middle of doing. And who are you?
For the princess is still alive. You thought she could be killed so easily?
If you do choose to fight, I will stand with you.
All of us. And I as well.
Hold on. I understand that you're setting up a potential third movie, but did all of the characters agree to fight with Cora because she didn't manage to kill the child that she thought she'd murdered? Am I getting that right? Because I'm a little confused. Why is everyone so cool with the whole child murder thing? I'm very puzzled by this.
I guess we'll never know.
That is, unless there actually is a third movie. And I think I speak on behalf of literally everyone when I say, yes, please, we definitely want that. And if there is, I'll definitely be watching it. And hopefully you'll be joining me for it. Until then, take care. I'll see you around. And as always, a big shout out to the channel members and the Patreons. We have the top tiers. These are the Knights of Law, Infinite Dumdum, Puzzlebon, Flunky, David, Jax, Koss, Michael Turpia, Texas Lawman, ATS, Michael Turpia, I said you twice, Jaggedy69, nice, Saint Nemo, Steve the Goat, I am quite dyslexic, Michael, Nystagmus, the Grand Admiral, Jordan96, and Satema Kano. To each and every one of you, I thank you for serving the realm. Tier 2s, Saeed, Dr. Musky, Yonwich, Hadziu, Kenneth Dogramechi, Mark Maiden, Sensei Fang, Mendicant Bias, Agent Mo62, Stu Cheeks, Michael S., Rich Warwick, McLegend Face, Kidnap Tiger, and Say It to each one of the tier 2s and each and every one of the tier 1s as well. I thank each and every one of you for going out of your way to choose to directly support me here on this channel. It makes a massive difference to me. It really, really does. And it helps me to continue producing these videos. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And there we go. Another day, another video. Will you join me for my next one? You better do. You little bitch. But until then, take care of yourselves and I'll see you very soon.